A lot of property investors think that property management is just collecting rent, filling vacancies, and unclogging toilets. And if that's what you think, you are going to hire the wrong person. And the problem is you're not going to know it until that wrong person has cost you money or exposed you to risk and liability that you aren't prepared for. But you're here on my channel and you want to learn more about finding and working with a property manager because you've made the decision. That is how you're going to grow and scale your investment business. And I applaud you. It's a great decision. But I meet investors all the time and they say, Jen, we really like the way you operate and you communicate. And if I was in your market, I'd hire you. Can you tell me how to go about finding a property manager? And I've read all the guides out there. And listen, it's good advice. And we're going to cover some of that here. But I think I have a different kind of take, an inside baseball kind of take that I want to share with you. This is a great video to watch if you're exploring hiring a property manager and don't know where to start. We'll take you through all the steps. I'm PM Jen, that stands for Property Manager Jen, and I'm a buy and hold advocate and enthusiast, and I've made that up. But what that means is I help buy and hold investors hold more successfully. And so I've been doing this for over 22 years. I have a business in Williamsport, Pennsylvania called One Focus Property Management, but you might see me online or on stages at real estate investment events talking and preaching the buy and hold gospel. My evangelism really comes to roost here on YouTube with series just like this one. So let's get started. First, we've got to find out who's even available to work with, right? And so that's going to start with a web search, right? You need to do the web search to find out who's doing this kind of business in your market. What are even your list of contenders? And in the next section, we'll get into what to look at on them. But I want you to first focus on finding out who they're affiliated with. So in your state, if property management is a licensed activity and requires something from your real estate commission or board, I want you to know about that requirement. And here in Pennsylvania, property managers must be real estate brokers. Salesperson's licenses won't cut it. Brokers are property managers. And you need to know that requirement and then research of those candidates that you found, which of them are licensed, what are their license numbers, and I want you to learn how to look up disciplinary records in your government portal. All these government portals have these government agencies, the real estate boards, have a responsibility to protect consumers. So they're going to talk about disciplinary records publicly on their licensees. So I want you to look up the licensees that you'll be working with and find out what their disciplinary records are. Another thing I want you to do with this list of contenders is start looking at their professional affiliation. So do they belong to the local realtor board? Some do, some don't. Do they belong to any trade associations? And that might be the National Association of Residential Property Managers. It might be IREM, the Institute for Real Estate Management. Could even be the National Apartment Association. Are they aligned with any of those? And then taking that a step further, looking more locally. Are they involved in local landlord or real estate investor associations? Are they involved in the Chamber of Commerce? Is there anything like that locally that they're participating in where we can get a feel for how they do business? There's one more place I want you to check. I almost forgot. You likely have a real estate investor meetup in your area. So this is a group of people that get together. Sometimes they charge a small fee to belong, but typically these are free and open to anybody who wants to come. But I want you to go to those meetups and I want you to talk to people. What sort of experiences have they had with the property management providers in your market? So I want you to get real firsthand experience. Those meetups are a great place. That's one reason why people really value them. It's a place to converse and share information and get better information than what you might just find online. Now that you've gathered the list of contenders, the service providers in your market, and you've went all these places and you found out about their licenses and their affiliations, I want you to start being critical. So we're going to look through the organizations they belong to or don't belong to. We might look at involvement they've had in the industry and just get a feel for how active they are in this. One thing I've noticed is that it's hard to know when somebody's in real estate what they're actually practicing. They might be a property manager and they work with buyers and they work with sellers and they do all different kinds of things, but you wonder, what are they truly an expert at? So something I like to encourage you to do is look at their web presence. So that's going to be things like their website, their actual company website, but also social media. I want you to be critical of what are they posting about? What are they showing? That's what they're doing all the time. What are they running ads for? So let's say this person sells homes and is a property manager. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, but if you're shopping for property management services, it might interest you to know that that person spends 10 or 20% of their time doing property management activities, and therefore 10 to 20% of their income is sourced from that, versus the 80 to 90% of their time they spend on real estate sales. And then, of course, the income that comes with that kind of activity. So I want to know, as a property management consumer, that I'm getting expert, dedicated service from the professional. And so I like to look at websites and say, hey, how much are they talking about their property management services, the properties they have available for rent, their processes? Are they being transparent about how they do business there? Additionally, on their social media, if their entire feed is about things that aren't property management related, well, then I'm going to assume that their time and attention is not on property management. A great source of information at this stage is public reviews. So where you live, that might be Yelp, it might be Google, it might be on Facebook. I know here in my market, we don't really tend to use Yelp, but Google reviews are used and Facebook reviews if you allow them. So one thing to know about property management companies as you're searching is we tend to have mixed reviews. So we are serving a couple of different audiences, right? There's a whole audience of tenant residents out there that are interacting with us to rent the properties that we manage. And then, of course, we have clients that we engage with, folks like you, the real estate investor. And so when you're reading those reviews, you're going to see all different kinds of experiences. And I want you to be critical of who those reviews are coming from and the responses and replies. So if you look up my company's reviews, you're going to see people who are frustrated when we made decisions that didn't go in their favor. Maybe we decided to end their tenancy for whatever reason. Maybe we denied them tenancy. They didn't qualify for the property. Maybe they didn't get a property they were in contention for. And so they're understandably frustrated. I want you to see those sorts of reviews, see the responses, and see if it doesn't put into any more clarity what's actually going on there. So I just wanted to give you that inside look. I'd be very critical of a property manager who had all 5-star reviews. That means, are they truly doing the work of being a property manager, which is to set and enforce boundaries and hold people accountable? This is what we're hired to do after all. So there's just a little bit of color into reading online reviews. So pretty typically when you reach out to these companies, you're going to have a little bit of an exchange, and then you're going to have an interview or a discussion call. And this could be one call, this could be a series of calls, depending on what you need to make a decision. But the interview is something I really want you to be critical of. The first thing I want you to be critical of is their responsiveness. So how responsive is the property management company to your request for more information? This gives you an idea of how responsive they're going to be through working with you, right? Because when are they going to be the most responsive? When they're trying to get your business. When you're calling because you're upset about a bill or something that happened and you're expressing frustration and maybe trying to hold the property manager accountable, if they're not going to be responsive, that's going to be very, very difficult to deal with. So I like to judge their responsiveness through the sales cycle and realize that that is likely the best I am ever going to get from that company. When you're engaging with these property management companies, you could be talking to the owner of the company, a business development manager, maybe a property manager, maybe just a receptionist. Be clear who you're speaking with so you can hold the right level of expectation, because I want you to be very critical of how prepared they are for your questions. Are they confident in their processes? Do they have processes? Are they figuring this out as they go? Are they showing you a demonstrated level of expertise in the market? And so that's going to vary depending on what you're looking for and who you're talking to, but I want you to be critical of this. Don't permit a confusing interview time to set you up to expect a good management experience. These interviews should give you a lot of confidence that you're speaking with an expert that can accomplish your goals. When we're talking with these folks, I want them to demonstrate their expertise. I want to hear stories and examples of how they've managed a property similar to this and what happened, how they solved a problem expertly, what sort of system or process have they come up as a workaround to a local market condition. I'm looking for them to really show me a philosophy, an approach, something I can believe in. So I'm looking for them to show leadership. And I think that's something that really attracts consumers to us, is that although we have a point of view and an approach and it's not right for every investor, investor, it is a strong point of view that the people it's right for really can easily resonate with. So I'm asking for you to be critical of their approach and really pay attention to that. And the last thing I want you to do in this interview phase is I want you to shop them. What do I mean, shop them? I want you to act like your potential customer and interact with this company. So again, who's your potential customer? Well, that's your tenant. So in my business, the property management business, I have clients. Those are the property owners, real estate investors who own the properties that we manage, and we owe them fiduciary duty. They are our client. But I also serve the tenant resident, the person who lives in the home, who pays the rent, who abides by the lease. And now that is not my client. I do not represent them and I do not owe them fiduciary duty. But I do owe them care and appropriate care and service as a customer of my client. So if you're an investor and you're looking into a property manager, you might be wondering, how are they going to take care of my tenant residents? Well, there's one way to find out, and that's to act as one. So I want you to shop this property manager. Find out some properties that they're advertising for rent and have a new client journey with them. Express interest. How long does it take them to get back to you? What's the quality of that communication? Are they being informative and treating the tenant prospect, in this case you, shopping them, like you'd want your customer to be treated? That is a genius hack, and I think you should be doing that before you hire them. And if you're having any issues with performance, I wouldn't hesitate to shop them again and share that information with them as a way to hold them accountable. But we'll be getting into that in later videos in the series. You're going to have a lot of questions for your potential property manager about how they do things, and you're going to hear different kinds of responses. You're going to hear different names of roles in these teams, and you're going to hear about different ways things are handled. I want to orient you to the couple different ways us property management companies set up our companies. Again, these are property management companies serving small investors with single family and small multifamily properties. So the three main ways they set these up is portfolio, apartmental, and hybrid. So portfolio means maybe that management company manages 600 doors of property. So 600 doors means 600 homes, an apartment or a house unit. And so they say, well, we have all these people who do property management, all these people who do leasing, maintenance coordination, and accounting. And they take one of each of those and they put them on a team and say, you, property manager, maintenance coordinator, leasing agent, bookkeeper, you manage this portfolio of 200 homes, right? 200 doors. And you team, B team, you manage this portfolio. Now, some of the benefits of that, the client, you get one point of contact. Usually you're contacting the property manager directly for your portfolio and you're building and developing that relationship. It's reasonable to expect that property manager to know most things going on in that 200 door portfolio, of which maybe you only have 1 or 3 doors, right? But you're getting that dedicated sort of like line of communication. And whether it's about the roof leak, the neighbor complaint, the tax issue, you're all dealing with the property manager. Now, the opposite of this is the departmental setup. And departmental means, okay, I've got people who do leasing, tenant relations, accounting, maintenance, and I've put them in departments. And that department serves the whole portfolio. So in that scenario of 600 doors, I would have a leasing department. And that leasing department is responsible for the occupancy and leasing on all 600 doors. Maintenance, the technicians and the coordinators coordinate maintenance for all 600. Same with accounting and so on. This is actually how I have my company set up. And it works great for the size we are at about 600 doors. It doesn't work great getting much bigger than that, which we're cognizant of. We like this approach because it puts the best of the best across the whole portfolio. We get more even consistent performance when we're doing this departmentally versus individual property managers controlling. And we also get more oversight from senior management on things. Now, it is a little bit of a point of contention for some of our clients when they go, I don't have one person to contact. I can't pick up the phone and just say, hey, Bess, tell me all about what's going on there and tell me about the maintenance and tell me about the leasing and tell me about the bills. That's very convenient for them. It is a little less convenient when you work with us because you're going to submit a ticket and depending on who's the expert, they're going to get back to you on that aspect of your property. And then the third way companies are setting up these days is something called hybrid. And you can imagine that somewhere between portfolio and departmental. Usually what they're doing is central sourcing things that can be done that way. So depending on the company, usually that's accounting and bookkeeping gets central source. So that's done like departmental, like maybe one department does that for everything, but then they'll leave maintenance coordination and tenant relations at the portfolio level and maybe pull leasing up to the company level. So depending on what's being done, but you're still getting, in theory, that individual attention and contributor. Now, one downside from the property management company's perspective on the portfolio way of doing things is that those relationships with those property owners, those tenants, get highly concentrated in that one team. And then change of team, turnover of employees can become costly to the property manager in terms of assets under management, or to the property owner if tenants had a really close relationship and they want to show loyalty and move on with that property manager. So I like departmental for those reasons, but it really is an individual choice. The first and sometimes only questions some investors have for me are, what do you charge or what are your fees? And I know they want to know a whole lot more than that. Those questions always seem to come out though. What are your fees? And there is a lot of confusion about how this works. So I'm going to aim to explain to you how most property managements are charging, the types of fees they're charging. But what's really important for you to understand is the companies you're considering, how do they do this? What questions can you ask them so you can get a clearer picture? And so let's talk a little bit about those. First, you have what I call the fees you pay to the property manager, or the management fees. Management fees are made up of a bunch of different fees. So typically, the primary management fee is a percentage of collected rents. And so this would be, just to give an example, 8%. So maybe the management fee is 8%. And that means for every dollar of rent collected by that manager, they're going to take 8% or 8 cents of that dollar as their management fee. What I love about management fees and the way they're typically charged, make sure, is that they're charged on received rents, not charged rents. So when that unit is vacant or that tenant isn't paying rent, your manager isn't getting paid until you get paid. I love it when incentives are aligned. And that's one of my favorite parts of this business. So management fee is a percentage of rents collected. It could also apply to a percentage of other fees collected. You want to know exactly what that 8% is being charged against. Also very typical to see from management companies is leasing and renewal fees. So these are fees charged when those two services are performed. Leasing is when we go find you a tenant. You have a vacant tenant and we need to attract and retain a qualified tenant and place them on, maybe a year's lease is what's typical. When you do that, when that service is performed, then a leasing fee is charged. And this would be a percentage of a month's rent generally. Sometimes there's minimum, sometimes there's flat fees, but you want to know when is that charged and how much is it. Now, after you have the tenant in place, eventually, hopefully, they're a candidate for renewal. And if the lease is renewed, some management companies charge a renewal fee. And that takes a lot of different shapes and forms. But again, it's usually like the leasing fee, either flat or a percentage of a monthly rent. And that's charged for securing future tenancy. It's common to see a couple other fees. Inspection fees. So sometimes managers are including inspections and preventive maintenance visits in their management fee. Other times you'll see them doing this more a la carte. Maybe it's only available upon request, or maybe it's mandated to happen once or twice a year with mandatory per occurrence fees. Eviction fees might be charged. So when the manager has to do court processes and things like that, sometimes, again, they're included in the management fee. Other times it's a per occurrence charge. Other common fees might be administrative or technology fees. So those are small fees that could be charged monthly or annually for software and things like that. Now, what you'll notice in my experience is that the higher the monthly management fee, the lower or less these other fees are, right? So the lower the management fee, the higher the likelihood you're going to have more a la carte fees. That's just been my observation, but it's really important you're clear on that before you pursue hiring one. Now, there's a whole other way that property managers are making money that you might want to be aware of, and those are the fees that they're collecting from the the tenant resident, right? Under these agreements, oftentimes the property manager is getting authority to collect various fees from your tenant resident for services provided. So a couple of examples of that, things like application fees, right? The property manager may charge an application fee to the tenant and keep that. They're not giving that to you because, of course, the property manager is paying the per application fees for credit and criminal reporting and all the labor for underwriting those applications. So it's usual, although you'll want to ask, who's getting the application fees? And then, of course, who has the associated expenses related to underwriting? Really common right now with property managers is resident benefit packages. So there's a lot of things we're able to do to make the housing that we manage for you more appealing to residents. More services we want to give them that reduce risk, but also make it easier for them to live there. Probably subject for a different video, but you want to ask, does the property manager use a resident benefits program or package? I think they're great. I think sometimes they cross the line. And so you want to be really critical of what they are and who's getting the fees for them and who's profiting what. And that's just something to get clarity on and understand. Late fees. Late fees are something that oftentimes property managers are either keeping some or all of. So you want to ask about that. When late fees are charged in accordance with the lease that you have with these tenants, who's getting that late charge? And oftentimes property managers are justifying that by saying, hey, we're the ones with the extra expense in the collection of this, the extra labor, notice posting, all of that kind of stuff. So we feel entitled to get that late fee. But again, all of this is negotiable. You just want to be clear about this and understand it before you hire your property manager. Another fee you might think about is pet fees. So it's pretty usual when, there's a rent, say it's $1,000 a month, but maybe the tenant has a dog and the pet fee that the manager uses or you've permitted allows them to have a pet in the unit for a pet fee, a monthly pet fee or pet rent, it's sometimes called. Well, is the management company getting all of that? Just the management fee on that? Or is it sometimes as much as half? So ask that question again. Property managers are defending the keeping of some or all of these fees by saying we're doing a lot of extra services to mitigate this risk for you, investor, and so we feel entitled to this. It's a mix of how it works with all the other fees, but ask. One more question I want you to ask is around maintenance and maintenance charges. So some property managers perform all the maintenance that the properties need. Some do none. Some are subbing it all out. It really varies greatly, but I'll tell you, when the property manager is doing maintenance for you, you want to be really clear, how is that maintenance being billed? So am I getting the services of your employees, property management company? Am I going to pay an hourly fee for their wages and then, for the parts and an upcharge on parts? Is this going to be done by subcontractors? And am I going to be charged a markup on that? And you want to ask very specifically, do you have relationships, either ownership, partnership, or kickback with any of the vendors you hire for the properties? So a very common thing that property managers might do is say, okay, client, I'm going to charge you, call it 10% markup on vendor subcontracted work. But they end up making 20% markup. Now, how's that? Well, they receive a bill for $100 and they turn around and say, Mr. Property owner, I'm billing you $110, 100 plus 10%. But they only paid $90 for that bill because they had a relationship where they get a 10% discount on all of this work. So listen, all of this is fine, and property managers are finding all different ways to capture the value that they create with their customers, but you should be asking so that it's not a surprise later and you didn't understand that's how they were making their money. These are the questions I want you to ask your potential property managers and decide if the answers are right for you. The first question, what is your main business? Is it real estate sales? Is it property management? Is it appraisals? What is it? What are you doing most, and where do you get most of your income? I am a purist. I want people doing mostly property management, engaging in that all the time because it's just so intensive and it requires a consistency to be there and be available. It's not something you can just shove in the cracks. Are your property managers W-2 employees or 1099 contractors? There's different ways people run this business, and I find people who come from real estate sales really kind of over-rely on that 1099 contractor model, and I don't believe that's a good way to go in property management. This is just PM Jen Jen's belief, but I think we should be working with property managers who utilize true employees, W-2 employees, people who are getting a sense of security and permanence in their employment, and they can grow and develop, and you can have that history. Ask them, do they invest personally in real estate? And of course, the answer I want to hear to that is yes. When people ask me that, I say, of course I get high on my own supply. And that's just a little joke, but it lets you know that I truly understand the journey you're going through as an investor, what you might be facing and what you value. So I want to see a personal buy-in on the asset class from the person who's managing my assets. You should ask them how long they've been doing property management and at what scale. So how many years and what size of a portfolio. 2 things make expertise: time in the trenches, right? Through the real estate cycle, and volume, the number of reps they do. And I am a diehard for expertise. So I want to hear a long amount of time and a lot of scale. And when I don't hear that, then I know that person's still gaining experience and somebody's paying for it. I want you to ask them, who's the broker of this company? Who's really in charge? In most states, the broker is the person in charge of the office. You might have dealings with the licensed salesperson, but truly the broker supervises all of that. And I want to know where the broker for this company is. Where do they sit most days? Is it in the office with the team doing the work that I'm hiring them to do? Is it in some main office hours away? Is it in a whole other state? See, property managers and realtors have all different ways of accomplishing this broker requirement. In my office, like I said, I'm a purist. I have 2 brokers. I have myself and an associate broker so that when I'm away, there's a broker here providing that knowledge, expertise, and supervision. But not every company takes this that seriously, and they're using white label brokers, out of state, people they don't really know. And the licensee, the salesperson licensee, is likely the one who owns the business. Now, this is weird, right? Because the broker is supposed to be the boss and controlling the activities of the salesperson. But if the salesperson owns the company and hires the broker to provide brokerage services, how does that set up where the broker's really in charge? I find that setup doesn't make for good adherence to the laws. So I want you to know who the broker is, where they sit, and how involved they are in this business. And it's my advice to you that you get one that is local, present, and involved. Ask them, do you do a site inspection before you sign a property? Not every property manager does this. There are property managers you can call up on the phone, have a conversation, give them an address, and they'll send over an e-document and sign up to manage your property right away. Other managers are more like me. I want to see the property. I want to see the lease. I want to make a plan. I want to do all of that and have you agree to it before we get into business. Now, I showed my cards there. I think it's important that your potential property manager goes and sees the property before they sign it. That shows experience. That shows that they understand the responsibility they're signing up for and want to have a plan of how to deal with it. It is an inexperienced thing to do to sign properties without considering it more deeply. These series are so fun to make. I love trying to teach you how to do this better. I want you to please subscribe, follow, engage with my content. I'm out there trying to make the buy and hold single and small multifamily asset class really sing for everyday Americans. I appreciate any comments.